There are moments in life when everything we've built or believed in seems to crumble right in front of us, when the path we've walked feels suddenly foreign, and the things that once gave us comfort no longer make sense. These are not just difficult moments, they are disorienting. The kind of moments that make us question who we are, where we're going, and whether anything really matters at all. In times like these, the feeling of being lost isn't just emotional, it's existential. And yet, these moments are also strangely universal. Everyone, at some point, faces a night so dark, they wonder if morning will ever come. It's natural to resist these experiences. We don't like discomfort, we seek clarity, certainty, progress. So when we're suddenly brought to a halt, when grief, failure, or sudden change takes over, it can feel like punishment, or worse, like abandonment. We wonder, why me? Why now? The silence from the universe can be deafening. But here's the thing, it is in this very silence, in the heart of that stillness, that something profound begins to stir. You see, when all feels lost, we are not being punished, we are being paused. Life is not trying to break us, it's trying to break something open in us. Our assumptions, our attachments, our identities. Sometimes these need to be shaken loose so we can finally see the world and ourselves differently. The ground we walk on must sometimes crack for new light to enter. And that's hard to accept when you're in the thick of it, when you've lost someone, when your plans have unraveled, when you've poured your heart into something only to watch it slip away. No one wants to be told, there's a higher purpose in that pain. That message only lands if it's spoken gently, patiently, by someone who's walked through it too. So allow me to speak to you, not from a place of theory, but from lived experience. I've known what it is to be lost, not just once, but many times. I've known the ache of dreams that didn't come true, the confusion of change that came without warning, the feeling of standing still while everyone else seemed to move forward. But it was in those seasons of stillness, of emotional winter, that something within me quietly shifted. And I didn't realize it until much later, but those moments had not been empty. They had been working on me from the inside, reshaping my perspective, deepening my empathy, recalibrating my compass. When we allow ourselves to truly feel lost, not rush to fix it, not numb it away, not slap on hollow positivity, but really feel it, we come into contact with something sacred. That emptiness we fear so much isn't a void to be filled with distraction. It's a space where deeper questions arise, where healing begins, where transformation becomes possible. That feeling of loss, of being disoriented, is often the very evidence that we're undergoing change. Just like a caterpillar must dissolve into a formless goo inside its cocoon before becoming a butterfly, we too sometimes need to lose shape in order to take on a new form. And in that messy, unformed place, our truest self, our soul, has the chance to speak. We live in a world obsessed with clarity and forward motion. But what if the moments that feel like a standstill are actually pivots? What if being lost isn't the opposite of being on the path, but part of the path itself? The forest you feel trapped in may actually be the exact terrain your soul chose to travel to grow. And while we may not see the destination just yet, the journey itself is shaping us for it. The universe doesn't always reveal its plans all at once. It moves slowly, subtly, often in silence. But just because we can't hear it doesn't mean it has gone quiet. Just because we feel lost doesn't mean we are. Sometimes being lost is how we are found. And so, if you find yourself in that place right now, uncertain, tired, defeated, know this: your pain is valid. Your confusion is not weakness. Your despair is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you are deeply alive and that something within you is ready to evolve. Trust the darkness. Trust the unraveling, because even in the depth of it, especially in the depth of it, the universe is already weaving something new. You just can't see it yet. And that's exactly how it's meant to be. There's a particular kind of suffering that comes not just from what's happening around us, but from our desperate attempts to make it stop. We feel things falling apart, and instinctively we cling tighter. We try to fix, to control, to hold on to the old shapes of our lives, even when those shapes no longer fit who we're becoming. We scramble for certainty, for answers, for the comfort of knowing what's next. But the more we grip, the more things seem to slip through our fingers, and so we find ourselves not only in pain, but exhausted by the fight against it. This is where many of us find ourselves stuck, not in the pain itself, but in our refusal to let go of how things should be. We bargain, we replay the past, we try to strategize our way out of heartbreak, uncertainty, or failure. We look for guarantees. We try to force a door open that is clearly closing. And when nothing works, we wonder what we're doing wrong. But here is a truth that's hard to swallow. Sometimes, the only way forward is through surrender. Now, let's be clear. Surrender is not the same as giving up. It's not about weakness or passivity. True surrender is a conscious, courageous act. It's choosing to release control when we finally understand that control was only ever an illusion. It's saying, I don't know what comes next, but I trust that something deeper is unfolding. And in that moment, something powerful begins to happen. The war inside us quiets. The resistance softens. We stop pushing against the current of life and allow ourselves to be carried for a while. This surrender is not defeat, it's alignment. We stop trying to impose our limited perspective on a process that is far more intelligent than our minds can comprehend, and when we do, we create space for clarity to arise, for healing to begin, for the right people, the right opportunities, the right timing to show up without force. Life, when we allow it, organizes itself in extraordinary ways, but first, we have to step aside. Often, the fear of surrender is rooted in a belief that if we stop managing every detail, everything will collapse. That if we let go, we'll lose even more. But ironically, it is in surrender that we regain our footing. We begin to see with new eyes. We begin to feel our way forward rather than think our way through. Life starts to guide us not from the outside, but from within. I have seen again and again how a person, right on the edge of despair, discovers a sense of peace. Not by solving their problems, but by stopping the fight against them. It's like standing in the middle of a storm and realizing you don't have to outrun it. You can just stand still and let it pass. The storm will pass. The grief will shift. The unknown will eventually become known. But we cannot force that timeline, and we cannot avoid the process. Surrender asks us to loosen our grip on the plans we made so we can receive the path that is actually meant for us. It asks us to stop clinging to identities, relationships, or goals that once served us but no longer do. This isn't easy. It takes immense trust. Trust in something greater than our current understanding. Trust in the rhythm of life. Trust in the quiet intelligence that lives beneath all things. Sometimes people ask, but what if I let go and nothing comes to take its place? And to that I say, the emptiness that follows surrender is not a punishment, it's a preparation. Nature always fills a vacuum, but it fills it in its own time, not ours. The space we create by letting go becomes sacred ground for the new to grow. We must be patient with that silence. When you find yourself in a place where nothing is working, where all your trying has led to more confusion, consider that maybe you're being asked not to try harder, but to let go. Not to figure it out, but to feel your way through. Not to push, but to soften. That shift alone can change everything. Not because your outer world suddenly transforms, but because your inner world becomes receptive to change. The moment we stop trying to force clarity is often the moment it begins to arrive on its own. Not as a lightning bolt, but as a whisper. Not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet sense of peace that tells us, you're not lost. You're just in the in-between. And that in-between is sacred. It's where the old dissolves and the new hasn't yet emerged. It's not a void, it's a womb. When we can meet that space with trust instead of fear, with openness instead of resistance, we come into harmony with the deeper flow of life. We begin to experience the beauty of surrender, not as an end, but as a beginning. And in that beginning, everything changes. There is a strange truth we often miss when life is at its most chaotic. Some of our greatest growth doesn't happen when things are going well, it happens when everything seems to fall apart. We don't usually notice it in the moment, of course. When we're hurting, when something dear has been taken from us, when our plans have collapsed, our first instinct is to ask why. We search for reasons. We want to understand, and above all, we want relief. But clarity doesn't often arrive during the storm. It waits, quietly, until we've walked through it. What's easy to overlook in pain is the quiet work it's doing beneath the surface. Just as the soil must be broken open before a seed can take root, there are parts of us that only awaken through hardship. It's in those dark, uncertain seasons that we confront the truths we've ignored, the identities we've outgrown, and the patterns we've inherited, but never questioned. Pain disrupts the surface of life, yes, but it also invites us to go deeper, to ask different questions, to look inward instead of always forward. The irony is that we spend so much time trying to escape these moments, not realizing they hold some of our most important answers. We label them as failures or misfortunes, when in fact, they're often thresholds, invitations to grow, and the growth they offer isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, almost imperceptible. A softening of the heart, a shift in our perspective, a deeper compassion for others. But over time, these small inner changes shape our entire way of being. I've come to believe that when things fall apart, they're often falling into place, but not the place we had imagined. The universe has its own rhythm, its own logic. It rearranges us, not to punish, but to prepare. Sometimes it removes what we thought we couldn't live without, only to make room for something more honest, more whole. The losses we resist often become the very turning points that lead us back to ourselves. There is wisdom hidden in chaos, but it reveals itself slowly. In the moment, all we might see is confusion, the job that ended, the relationship that broke, the identity we had wrapped ourselves in now peeling away. It can feel like destruction. But what if it's not? What if it's a kind of sacred deconstruction, meant to clear away everything that's no longer aligned with who we truly are? If we look closely, we can often trace back moments of personal transformation to times of hardship. The heartbreak that taught us how to love ourselves, the failure that redirected our life's purpose, the disappointment that shattered our illusions and set us free. We don't grow because everything goes our way. We grow because we're stretched, challenged, sometimes even broken. And through that breaking, we discover strength we didn't know we had. But this kind of growth requires a willingness to stay present with what hurts. Not to bypass it with false positivity or rush through it with impatience, but to sit with it, listen to it, ask what it's here to teach us. That's not an easy thing to do. It asks for humility, it asks for courage, and it asks for trust. Trust that life is still on our side, even when it doesn't feel that way. We are conditioned to value progress we can see, results we can measure. But soul work doesn't follow that logic. It happens in silence, in uncertainty, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And often, it's in those same moments that we begin to rediscover what really matters. Not the roles we've played, not the image we've built, but something deeper, something more enduring. We find our core, and from that place, we begin to rebuild. So when your world feels chaotic, when the ground beneath you feels unsteady, try asking not just why is this happening to me, but what is this asking of me? What part of me is being invited to evolve? What truth have I been avoiding that now demands to be seen? These questions don't offer quick answers, but they do open a door, one that leads inward and eventually forward. Transformation doesn't always come in the form of triumph. Sometimes it comes disguised as loss, but it's still a gift, even if we don't recognize it at first. And if we can be brave enough to face it, to walk through it with our eyes and hearts open, we will find that chaos isn't the end. It's the beginning of a deeper alignment with who we are meant to become, and that is never wasted. There is a quiet intelligence woven into the fabric of life, something just beneath the surface of our everyday experience. Most of us are so caught up in trying to make sense of things, to get from one moment to the next, that we often overlook it. But if we slow down, just enough to really notice, we begin to see it. Small moments, subtle shifts, a sentence from a stranger that feels like it was meant just for us, a coincidence that seems too precise to be random, an unexpected delay that ends up saving us from something we didn't even know was coming. These are not accidents. They are whispers. We call them signs, synchronicities, nudges from something greater. And whether you think of that something as the universe, fate, spirit, or simply life itself, it doesn't really matter. What matters is learning how to pay attention. Because when all feels lost and logic fails to offer comfort, these are the moments that remind us we are still being guided. It's easy to dismiss these things as chance. We're taught to value facts, proof, and certainty. But life has its own language, one that isn't always rational, but is deeply meaningful. And the more we tune into it, the more we realize how deeply connected everything really is. People show up right when we need them. Opportunities arise just when we've let go. A book falls off a shelf and opens to the exact line we didn't know we needed. If you've ever experienced something like that, even once, you know how it feels, like being seen by life itself. These aren't magical fixes or guarantees. They don't erase our pain or resolve our problems in an instant. But they do offer something else: reassurance. A sense that we're not alone in the chaos, that even when we don't have the answers, there is something moving around us and within us, trying to guide us back to the path we're meant to walk. Often, these signs come when we're most uncertain, not when we're soaring, but when we're stumbling. That's no coincidence. When we're in pain, we're more open. Our defenses drop. We start asking real questions. And in that vulnerability, life begins to respond. Not always loudly, not always clearly, but it responds. It might come as a sudden clarity in the middle of the night, or a song you've heard 1,000 times, but this time one line pierces you straight to the core. These moments don't make sense to the analytical mind, but they don't have to, because their truth is felt, not calculated. To notice these signals, we must be willing to step out of the noise, the constant mental chatter, the pressure to explain, fix, or figure everything out. We have to be still enough to listen, attuned enough to feel. It's not about being special or chosen. It's about being available, open, receptive. The universe is always speaking. It's just that most of us are too busy, too distracted, or too doubtful to hear it. Sometimes the signs come as redirection. A door slams shut and we feel rejected. Only later do we see what we were being protected from. Other times, a gentle pull guides us to something new, a project, a place, a person. We may not understand why we're drawn to it, but something inside says this matters. And if we honor that feeling, if we trust it, we often discover it was the beginning of a new chapter, a new calling. Luckily, none of this means we stop making choices or taking responsibility for our lives. It simply means we walk with awareness, that we remain open to the possibility that life is more mysterious and more compassionate than we give it credit for, that even in the mess, there is meaning trying to emerge. I've found that when I stop demanding certainty and start paying attention to these subtle cues, a kind of partnership with life begins to form. It's not about control, but cooperation. It's not about forcing outcomes, but following what feels deeply right, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. Especially then. The more we practice this, the more trust begins to grow. Trust not in a fixed future, but in a living connection to something wiser than our plans. That trust becomes an anchor. It steadies us when things are unclear. It reminds us that we're not drifting. We're being drawn, guided, shaped. So if you're in a place where nothing seems to make sense, I encourage you to soften your focus. Look not for grand revelations, but for small, meaningful threads. A conversation, a dream, a repeated symbol, the things that stir something in you without explanation. These are the threads of your deeper story, and if you follow them gently, faithfully, they will take you somewhere real. Because even when life seems silent, it is still speaking. One of the greatest traps we fall into when we're struggling is comparison. It's so subtle that we hardly notice it at first. We look around and see others moving forward, starting new relationships, landing new jobs, finding purpose, making things look effortless. And we start to wonder what's wrong with us. Why aren't we there yet? Why does it feel like everyone else got the map and we're still wandering in circles? This kind of thinking doesn't just weigh us down. It disconnects us from something vital, our own timing, our own path, our own unfolding. The truth is, There is no universal timeline for healing, or success, or transformation. No two people are meant to bloom at the same moment. Nature never rushes a season, and neither should we. Some lives blossom early, some take time, some chapters begin in bright, obvious ways, while others start quietly, in the dark, with no fanfare. But every path is sacred, every path has value, and more importantly, every path is uniquely designed for the person walking it. We are taught from a young age to measure ourselves against others. School grades, career milestones, relationships, even happiness. It all gets weighed and compared. But these measurements are shallow. They miss the depth of a person's journey. They don't account for the inner battles someone has fought, the unseen growth that takes place during the quiet seasons. Just because you can't see progress on the surface doesn't mean it isn't happening. Sometimes the most profound changes are the ones happening underground, where no one can see. When we judge our journey against someone else's highlight reel, we do ourselves a deep disservice, because we're not living their life. We don't have their soul, their lessons, their purpose. What they're here to learn might be completely different from what we're here to learn, and the timing of their breakthroughs says nothing about the value or potential of ours. It can be difficult to trust your own pace, especially in a world that celebrates speed. But speed doesn't always equal depth. Some of the most beautiful transformations take years. They require space, setbacks, pauses. They need time to settle into the bones. And when those transformations finally rise to the surface, they're not just moments of success. They're the reflection of an inner strength that was forged slowly and silently over time. I've seen this in people again and again. Someone spends years feeling stuck, uncertain, as if nothing is working. And then, almost without warning, everything begins to align. The opportunity appears, the right person walks in, a sense of clarity arrives. But it's not random, it's not luck. It's the result of everything they've been living through and learning, even when it felt like nothing was happening. The waiting wasn't wasted, it was part of the becoming. We don't always get to choose the pace of our journey. We don't get to control the timing of when things fall apart or when they come together. But we do get to choose how we show up in the meantime. We get to choose to stay present, to keep listening, to keep honoring the deeper truth that lives within us, even when it seems like nothing's moving. And there's something else, something essential. We are not falling behind. That's a myth we must release. You can't fall behind on a path that's made just for you. You can't be late to your own life. Everything you need to experience, everything your soul came here to grow through, will meet you in its time. Not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. Your journey might not look like anyone else's, and that's exactly the point. When we stop comparing, something beautiful happens. We begin to trust ourselves again. We begin to respect our own rhythm. We start hearing our own voice more clearly. That voice knows where to go. It knows what we're ready for and what we're still growing toward. And in honoring that voice, we start to move in harmony with life instead of trying to race against it. So if you're feeling left behind, remember this: you are exactly where you need to be, not because it's comfortable, but because it's honest, because it's shaping you in ways that only you can understand. And one day, when the time is right, all that slow growth will rise into view, not as something that makes you like everyone else, but as something that reveals who you truly are. And there is nothing more right on time than that. When everything around us begins to collapse, when plans dissolve, when relationships fade, when we no longer recognize the life we're living. It's tempting to believe that we've reached some kind of ending, a final, irreversible failure. We think, this must be it. There's nothing left. And in that space, where hope feels so far away, it's easy to lose faith not only in the future, but in ourselves. What we once believed with confidence, that things happen for a reason, that life carries meaning, that we are part of something greater, suddenly feels naive or worse, foolish. But that loss of faith is not permanent. It's not the end. It's a natural part of being human. In fact, it often marks the beginning of something more real. You see, faith that has never been tested isn't truly rooted. It's only through the crumbling, through the aching questions and the silence that follows, that something deeper has the chance to emerge. We are asked, not forced, to begin again, to rebuild, not from the surface, but from the core. And that rebuilding doesn't happen all at once. It begins quietly, often invisibly. A shift in perspective. A moment of calm where once there was only panic. A subtle sense that maybe, just maybe, we're not as lost as we thought. These aren't breakthroughs we can always explain. They're more like a soft light returning to a place we feared had gone dark forever. What's important to understand is that what feels like an ending is so often a redirection. The universe doesn't close doors to punish us, it closes them to guide us elsewhere, to where we're meant to grow next. But when we're in the thick of the loss, we can't see that yet. It's like standing too close to a painting. All we see is chaos, brushstrokes without form. It's only with distance, sometimes days, sometimes years, that the image begins to make sense. If you've ever looked back on a painful chapter and thought, I wouldn't want to live through that again, but I wouldn't trade what I learned from it, then you've experienced this already. That's what rebuilding faith really means. Not pretending things are okay when they aren't, but learning to hold space for something greater, even when life doesn't meet your expectations. It's about choosing to believe there's meaning, even when you don't yet understand what that meaning is. And it's also about remembering that the universe doesn't work on our timeline. It moves in cycles, in seasons, in waves. What feels dormant now is not dead. What feels silent is not absent. Just as winter holds the seeds of spring, your current pain may hold the exact conditions needed for your next becoming. It may not feel like it now, but even this, especially this, can be part of the plan. We forget that the caterpillar has no idea it's becoming a butterfly. All it knows is that everything familiar is dissolving. The cocoon is dark, it's uncomfortable, it's lonely, but what emerges from that darkness is something more expansive, more capable, more alive than the creature that first entered it. That transformation didn't happen in spite of the breaking. It happened because of it. So, if your faith feels broken, let it break. Let the old ideas fall away. Let the beliefs that no longer serve you dissolve. What remains will be something more honest, more durable. A faith that doesn't require proof to feel real. A quiet knowing that lives in your bones, not just your mind. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to force hope into places it doesn't yet belong. Just stay open to the possibility that what feels like the end of your story might only be the end of a chapter. Let the unknown be what it is, a space not of emptiness, but of potential. But it isn't about blind optimism. It's about trusting the deeper rhythm of life, about allowing yourself to stand in the ruins and still believe that something beautiful can be built again. And it will be. Maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe not on the timeline you hoped for, but something is already forming in the silence, in the stillness,